and welcome to State of the Union. I'm Maeve McMahon in Brussels. Well, this week saw the city come to life again after the lull around the EU elections. Incoming MEPs flocked here to take selfies, show their voters they're getting down to work. But the big happening of the week was this: EU leaders catching up on the European Parliament elections. With the world in turmoil, rumour had it they would quickly decide who should get what top Brussels job. But their 7-hour summit was just an anticlimax for hundreds of journalists with nothing to report.
I think it's our collective duty to make a decision by the end of June. I made several times publicly this point.
But the summit proved to be a very good day out for this man, the outgoing Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte. With the Dutch coalition government almost sworn in, Mark Rutte hopes to be the next Secretary-General of NATO. He got some FaceTime with Hungary's Prime Minister on the sidelines of that summit and agreed not to deploy Hungarian troops to Ukraine nor to spend Hungarian money on Ukrainian missions. This got him the thumbs up from Viktor Orban to run NATO. What didn't get a thumbs up among Brussels circles, though, was this: the Hungarian presidency's slogan for their upcoming 6-month EU presidency. A copycat from the Trump days, Hungary chose "Make Europe Great Again" as their mantra to shape the EU's political agenda and warn that Europe is declining in the world. Meanwhile, in Luxembourg on Monday, EU environment ministers gave their final blessing to a landmark law that aspires to restore damaged ecosystems and polluted rivers. After years of negotiations, it's a big win for Belgium, currently presiding over the European Union, even though the Belgian government actually abstained from the vote due to divisions between Wallonia and Flanders. The vote only passed, though, thanks to Austria, whose Green Environment Minister, Leonora Gewessler, voted in favour, going against the government line.
It's not only the legal case, but also long-standing practice in the Austrian government that in council meetings the ministers decide. That's what I did today.
Well, to hear what this law will mean exactly, earlier I spoke to Ioannis Agapakis, an environmental lawyer from Client Earth, who's been following this law for years and was very pleased to see it pass. So what exactly is in this nature restoration law? What will happen once it's implemented?
So the law, in practice, seeks to restore all ecosystems in Europe in need of restoration by 2050. And in order to achieve that, it imposes upon member states a series of binding targets to restore a diverse array of ecosystems, so from forests and oceans to farmlands and urban green spaces, by 2030 through 2050. So member states, the first stage that they will have in order to implement the nature restoration law, will be to come up with their national restoration plans by 2026. These are the plans in which they will determine the measures, but as well as the areas that they will choose to restore. Yet delaying restoration action up until 2026 would not be advisable, as that would impose increased regulatory burden and costs upon member states.
And why, in your view, was this law so necessary?
So, just for a bit of context, currently less than 15% of EU's ecosystems are in good condition. So we continue observing a steep biodiversity decline across the Union, and this is despite the already existing laws and all the non-binding policy initiatives that are in place. Scientists are warning that once certain tipping points are reached, the functions of ecosystems, functions relating to their capacity to produce food or to regulate water and even protect us from climate-related disasters, are disrupted.
Now, this law was not, of course, without controversy. The farmers were against it. Did they get any concessions in the end?
The majority of negotiations revolved around agricultural ecosystems and farmers. It is very important to note that the law imposes zero legal obligations directly on farmers, and the provisions on the restoration of agricultural ecosystems have been significantly watered down in order to reflect the realities of the sector and the requests that were made. Still, I would like to underscore that reducing nature restoration into ideological ideological warfare, as we observed happening in the past year, is quite irresponsible. Farmers are the ones that first experience the adverse impacts of both the climate crisis, but also the crisis of biodiversity collapse. And these are also the first and best agents to mitigate such crises.
And this law, of course, is a key component of the EU Green Deal. What else should we look out for in the EU Green Deal? Should other parts of it come to life soon? Or do you think it's politically dying out due to the political environment?
So, first and foremost, I think that the vast majority of legislative files coming out of the EU Green Deal have either been adopted or terminated due to political considerations. There are still a couple of files that we may see becoming reality in the next coming years. For instance, the revision of the Energy Taxation Directive, as well as the revision of the Marine Strategy Framework Directive. Both instruments are quite critical in our transition into a climate neutral and biodiverse Europe. Still, I think that the focus of EU lawmakers and member states, most importantly, will really be on implementation. The EU Green Deal provided a momentum, but also, at the end of the day, provided a series of legal tools that member states now have in their arsenal in order to tackle the complex and intertwined crises that they are facing.
Thank you so much for speaking to us. Agapakis there from Client Earth speaking to me a little earlier. And one topic we didn't dive into was the impact global warming could have on beer. With summer festivals underway, scientists keep warning that hotter, longer and drier summers could change the taste, texture and even increase the price. Now, beer, of course, is dear to the hearts of all Belgians. So it would come as a surprise this week to see French beer for sale in Belgian supermarkets. But turns out Belgian brewers have been teaching their neighbours a thing or two about beer brewing, as climate change is also presenting the wine country with a challenge. Well, that's it for this edition of State of the Union with me, Maeve McMahon. Thank you so much for tuning in. See you soon.